Welcome to Wealth Untethered, your guide to the principles and mindset of a genuinely wealthy life. This podcast explores universal laws, principles, and strategies that lead to wealth and fulfillment. We delve into topics like investment, cash flow, business, estate and legacy planning, longevity, health, science, and more. All in an attempt to examine and challenge your mindset about what's possible for you. To learn more about Wealth Untethered, visit our website, wealthuntethered.com. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Patrick, a massive tether that I've experienced in my life, and it has to do with my relationship with Wendy. In December, Wendy and I will have been married 30 years. Like, we've been together a long time, and neither one of us came from money. And Wendy was raised with a tether, a mindset that she would get a certain amount of money and she would spend it. And then when the money was out, she wouldn't spend anymore. And she took that into our relationship. And I had my own tethers and stories around money and spending. And it was a massive, like, I'm closing my eyes thinking about it. It was like this massive source of confusion and frustration and like money and cash flow and having enough on a monthly basis to spend and enjoy, and who's spending too much money and who's not, where's it all going, and the packages that show up at the front doorstep, and how much money is going to be spent on Christmas and how much money is being spent on gifts, and where's it all going? And oh my gosh, we have all this money come in, but there's only so much left at the end of the day. And is it positive or is it negative? And like some of the biggest arguments and disagreements, fights, knockdown, drag out fights that Wendy and I have had over the years have been around cash flow. And I'm so grateful today that we have that under control, that we've used this infinity wealth tool of what, why, lesson, apply, and the mindsets and the principles and the strategies that Wendy and I have implemented into our life around cash flow. Because that peace that I feel today around cash flow in my life allows me to leverage that in a massive way, not only in my connection with Wendy, my connection with you, my connection with my clients, my overall creation and personal enjoyment in life as a result of having that under control and identifying it in my life today.
Well, here's what's interesting, and this goes to this, this topic of today, which is cash flow. You base it on cash flow, and this is most people, and I include myself in this in the past. It's the assumption of what your cash flow is. Okay, because we're going to get into the tools and the strategies today as well. But most people, they use their bank account, right, as kind of the barometer, right, of where they're at from a cash flow perspective. They use like their paycheck, and then so I think today, because of just this really consumer-based world that we live in, there's an infinite amount of things to buy, and there continues to be more and more advertisements, more and more like commerce that is in our faces, compelling us to buy
more than ever
before.
You
have credit. And I think what people don't realize is, first off, we'll get into budgeting, because I don't think budgeting really works. Okay, we're going to get into some cash flow strategies, but it's the awareness of what your cash flow is. If you actually had an objective measurement of what your cash flow is, then you'll be able to say, are we doing good? Are we not doing good? But right now, it's the assumption of what cash flow is that gets people into some craziness, especially in relationships.
Yeah. And it's interesting we're deliberate on why this is the actual first episode that we're coming out with. Before anything else that we could talk about around money and finance, we're talking about cash flow, because it really truly is the cornerstone to everything else occurring and happening in our life with money.
It really starts and ends with cash flow in a sense. Right. So again, let's unpack cash flow. Like you said, we consider it the cornerstone of wealth strategy. It's where wealth begins, right? So cash flow starts with income, right? Income is money that comes into your financial life, and it's because you created value. You've done something that was valuable to somebody else, and they exchange money as the medium of exchange for the value you've created. That so that comes into your life, then you have money that you pay out. Somebody created value for you that you're now paying for, right? Whether it's a mortgage on a house, whether it's utilities, whether it's entertainment, going to the movies, whatever. Okay, that's money going out. Positive cash flow is when you have more money coming in than going out. Negative cash flow is when you have more money going out than coming in.
That's right.
So the idea, right, of cash flow is to be positive. Okay. And then secondary, it's to have liquidity, right, as part of that cash flow. So if there's disruptive events that require, a one time or some variable type of expense, medical emergency, your basement floods, like that type of liquidity, when you have that, when you have a measurement of positive cash flow and you know that you're in positive cash flow, plus you have liquidity, typically 3 to 6 months of expenses, sometimes more, that is when it puts you into this mindset of like, all right, I know where we're at. I feel good about it.
Let me stop you really quick, Patrick. How many times in your life have you felt an abundance mindset and ability and desire to create when you have a positive cash flow versus negative?
For sure. I'll talk about,
It's
the
huge.
times it's put me into craziness, right? Which is like not knowing how you're going to pay bills next month, right? Not knowing how you're going to make payroll or having
Dude,
some
the
crazy,
stress,
it is.
anxiety.
Yep. But when you're positive cash flow and you have that buffer of liquidity, right? It's like, man, like you have this internal sense, right? That things are going pretty good.
And
Things
we
are
all
going good.
want that. We all want to create.
Yeah.
We all want to feel that abundance in
Yeah.
our life. So why not be deliberate about the cash flow in your life?
So putting a capstone on this idea of cash flow, it's ultimately you want to, as you earn income, as you save, as you accumulate wealth, you want to start getting cash flow off of your investments, off of businesses, so that you're to the point where you have a sense of financial independence. And that independence is you're not dependent solely on exchanging time for money. Okay. You have essentially money coming in, which gives you another level of freedom. I feel that if you're cash flow positive and you have some liquidity, no high interest debt, there's a sense of independence there, a sense of freedom. But to get to that point of financial independence, I feel that's when you have either business income, investment income coming in, right? That either takes care of all of your lifestyle expenses, maybe some of them, but it gives you an additional level of that. So that's kind of the capstone there. But in the end, cash flow starts. It's the starting place, and the ending place.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So let's talk about why cash flow is a challenge, because I would say of clients that we meet with, we even did some survey to our respective email database of, okay, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing financially, and it's cash flow,
Yeah.
right? So I think right now we're influenced, right, where we earn a paycheck, we spend, and whatever's left over, we save. And like I said, there continues to be more and more opportunities to buy stuff, right? There's like an infinite number of things. Now, human beings were wired to consume, as you were saying before about Wendy, right? This isn't an uncommon behavior, right? Human beings are wired to consume because our life depended on it a couple hundred years ago, and that biology is still, and I would say thousands of years ago, that biology is still there. So we need to consume because biologically we think if we don't consume, we're going to die.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really interesting to look at that dynamic. However, right now, that's the cash flow food chain that most people follow is they earn a paycheck, and then they spend, and then they have savings
Yeah.
left over. Now,
If they do.
what happens is, go back to the time where you first started to earn money, right? First job. So are you earning more or less today? Most people are earning more.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where, when you start off that way, you have expenses that are at the same level or slightly below what you were earning. But then you get into this, I would say, cycle of unconscious consumption where over time, as your income goes up, so do your expenses. Right. And it just keeps following that trend line. There's a common saying, your expenses rise to meet income.
100%.
So that's happening to most people, whether we know it or not. So we have to be intentional to disrupt that pattern and replace it with a more healthy one.
Yeah, it's so relevant in our lives because it drives so much like cash flow, money in our life is a major part of our life. It allows us to create an experience and fulfillment, and it's the medium of exchange. And so understanding it and being deliberate about it for sure.
So it's interesting where the principle of it, and we're going to get into what why lesson apply, as well as the mindset principles and strategies, kind of following our infinity wealth tool. But the idea of positive cash flow, negative cash flow, right? You can apply that to health, right? So if you uh, consume more calories than you expend through activity, what happens, right? You become more and more unhealthy. Okay, so I think it applies in the same sense to personal finance, right? Where you want to be producing more than you're consuming.
Yeah.
You always want to follow that, and that's essentially the positive cash flow position.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Patrick, real quick, my father, love him. He taught me so much. He died tragically in 2014 at the age of 70. But before he did, he was a truck driver. He drove long haul, and he taught me the value of hard work. He's an incredible man. I love him to this day. And but he didn't understand cash flow. He wasn't taught cash flow from his parents. He didn't learn it in school. He didn't learn it anywhere else. He certainly didn't pass it on. And because he didn't have that in his life, he got to a point mentally and physically where he could not work anymore. So he retired. And when he retired at the age of 65, so from 65 to 70, he drew $1,100 a month Social Security. That was his income. That was his cash flow. That's all he had. That's it. Nothing else. And as a result, he wasn't happy and he wasn't healthy mentally or physically as a result of having that low of a cash flow to even just take care of himself. And he ended up having a heart attack and dying. And so I would say that cash flow is pretty significant
It is.
to understand in our own life and to have it under control and to be deliberate about it.
So one thing that came up just now, this is a story just based on clients I've worked with, but I've had a number of clients that are just they've done incredibly well. They've accumulated assets, they have a lot of cash flow, but because they're not necessarily measuring it at the level that they could, they end up uh, not spending money. So it goes the other direction,
Mm,
right? Because you can have negative cash flow that obviously is going to create unhealthiness in your financial life. You can go the other way,
mm.
right? Where you have a ton of money that you're producing. Okay, money is coming in from assets, and you're limiting your lifestyle, right? And not having the experiences that you could have because you're not measuring. I remember once I was doing a case for a client where I showed him with the tools that we use that he had enough cash flow for his expenses for 300
Oh
years.
my god! And he had
And
no
he
clue.
was like,
He
no,
had
that's
no
not true.
idea.
That's not true. And I'm like, okay, so this is what you gave me as far as your financial inputs. Here's all the math. Okay. And here's how it plays out. And he's like, I could, and this is the client who
What an incredible discovery!
will go across town, right, and play at a municipal golf course where he lives on a beautiful country club and golf course, right? Lives his house was on the beautiful country club golf course, but goes across town to the municipal golf. So I'm not again, these are just the behavior patterns that we
Yeah,
develop over time. Not that it's good or bad, but it's aware. If he wants to still go about doing that, great. But being aware, right, objectively of what your cash flow is vital to making the most healthy decision. Again, life is about decisions. It's in the moment. It's making decisions, right? And living the best life possible. If that is going to create it, going to the municipal golf course, amazing. Okay. But if you're aware that, hey, I could probably play on the country club and be just fine and not impact, the money that I'm going to leave to my
it's
kids, or
incredible.
does that make sense? So
Yeah,
it goes both ways.
definitely. Yep, definitely.
All right, so we've covered, what, why, and lesson, right? Cash flow is vital. It's the cornerstone. It's the starting place. So now let's go into the application, right? So I think the first thing is knowing what your cash flow is, what's coming in,
The
what's going
awareness.
out. It's
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
awareness of it, right? And obviously it's simple, right? More coming in than going out is better. Okay, we seek for our clients to be at about 80% of their income is spent on lifestyle, right? That's kind of like learning to live off of 80%. Sometimes
Number one.
clients are there, sometimes they're negative, right? So it's milestones along the way that are important. Now,
And
go ahead.
Patrick, I want to stop you. And you mentioned this, but it's significant. I wasn't taught this. I don't know if you were taught this or not, but I'm glad that I have this today. And not only do I have the awareness, but I have it implemented into my life, and then I'm teaching it to my kids. We have a grandson now, and I'll want our daughter and myself also to teach this to our grandson, to learn to live off of 80% of what they bring in.
Mhm.
First of all, it gives us permission to spend and enjoy the 80%
Yes.
without any guilt. That means we're saving the 20%. Because we don't have pensions like we used to in the factory days years ago, where they put money aside. There are a few occupations that do have the pensions,
Yep.
but they're even taking those away. So if it's meant to be, it's up to us. It's up to us to create that pension for ourselves. No one's coming to save us. One of the first questions that I ask my clients when I meet with them and I'm going through their financial questionnaires, right at the top, right after their names and their family, I ask them if they're planning on an inheritance. Are you planning on an inheritance? Either side of the family, is there an inheritance coming in? And 96% of the time is no.
No.
No, they're not. Actually, it's more like 98. And then the other 2%, maybe here, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
there.
Maybe the
But they're
house,
not
maybe a small amount of money.
but they're
Yep.
not planning on it. It's
Mm.
not part of their financial plan to have a big amount of an inheritance come in for their retirement.
So it's up to them.
It's up to them.
Yep. All right. So that's the mindset I think is important. I'm going to go back to the beginning, right? Which is, if you're learning to live off of 80%, you are where you are right now. Working toward that is important. But the mindset is, number one, you're making an income. You're doing something that's valuable to the world, right? And as we've explained through the last couple of episodes, there's infinite possibilities there, right? So what this does is it opens up for, okay, how can I make more money? How can I provide more value? Then you go into, okay, from an expense standpoint, here are all the things that I'm spending money on. You start to be aware of, like, okay, maybe that's waste. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. But then you can start to discover, like, how to have the same enjoyment based on those expenses with either the same or less. So you work on both sides, but also part of cash flow. This is where it comes down to the strategy side of things. There are so many different strategies to improve, whether it's income, improve cash flow from investments, but there's also strategies to reduce tax liability. Tons of opportunities for business owners, right? So that's another opportunity where you can mitigate tax liability. You can find ways to have less expenses. Okay, we're not going to get into all of that today. Again, this is just the strategy side of things. Okay, and then, from a growth standpoint, it's working on something little. Maybe it's getting rid of, a couple of memberships or subscriptions that you have. Maybe it's figuring out ways to get a certification or additional training for your profession, right? To make more money and be more valuable.
Increase your personal stock value.
For sure. So once you're able to measure it and understand where you're at, it opens up opportunities for you to use your creativity, you to use like what's instinctively inside of you to solve problems and find opportunities to improve both money coming in and then also to minimize, mitigate, be more efficient with the money going out. But here's what's cool. It's like, if you know this, right? And let's say that you are just getting started in life and you have some student loan debt or whatever. Okay, when you understand this, okay, then you can look at, okay, I want to live in this neighborhood. I want to have this house. I want to, like, go on vacation. You now are able to do it in, I would say, a more effective way. I was going to say more responsible, but I think more effective, because if
Yeah.
you're able to understand where your liquidity is, where your income is, where your expenses are, then you can say, okay, I want to go to Europe next summer. What is it going to take to do that? Now you can start using your creativity to find ways to optimize your expenses and find ways to optimize your income.
Yeah, definitely. And so with all this in mind, what are you tethered to? What areas of your life around cash flow are you tethered to? What limiting mindsets and beliefs? And maybe you have this belief that you spend until the money's gone. And so we're here to challenge you on that, and then to implement some of these specific tools into your life to assist you with that, to untether you from that. So we want you to use the Infinity Wealth tool. We want you to. We want you to utilize that. We want you to challenge yourself. What, why, lesson, apply. We want you to identify the mindsets that you have around that, the principles and the strategies. That's number one. That's your homework assignment, to identify that and use this tool around cash flow in your life. And they can also,
I would say adopt some tools that will allow you to measure your cash flow. Now, I said in the beginning, budgeting to me doesn't work. Budgeting is like restrictive. I think we develop habits, we develop behavior patterns by reward. Okay. Spending is actually rewarding because we buy something that's new and novel and we're going to get something we didn't have before that produces like some weird things that go in our brain, some dopamine drips that like, ooh, I like spending. I think it's the same mechanism in a sense that gets us on social media way too much and way too often, right? But it's this idea that in order to adopt a new behavioral system, you have to replace what already exists and replace it with something that is rewarding as opposed to limiting. That's why I don't think budgeting works. Is budgeting is punishment, it's not rewarding.
hmm,
Okay, so we have actually partnered right with a company
yeah,
called Currents, and Currents. You can go onto the website. We'll have a link there where you can actually sign up for free. But Currents is a phone app that actually connects to a bank account that you own, that you control. But
love it.
the app was built with the understanding of everything we've been talking about. It was built on this idea that our cash flow food chain, the earning, spending, and saving after doesn't work. And it's this idea of earning, saving, spending. So it's an app that controls that, but it also has some gamification and reward pieces in there that rewards you. It shows that you're making progress. It shows that what your cash flow is. It shows what your liquidity is. You build, I don't know, your reserve account through it as well. It's an awesome app. Again, it's free for listeners. So just go to the website, wealthuntethered.com, so you can sign up and it's no expense to you. Anything more you want to say about that? Again, that's a tool. We don't want to necessarily unpack the tool. There's some education and some information that already exists that will teach you more about it if you're interested.
No, but yes, Patrick, it's been in just the last couple of months that I was introduced to Currents. And it's now finally there's a tool that can be utilized to measure and to gamify cash flow and to be deliberate about it, to untether ourselves from things of the past and tether ourselves that really allow it to be limitless in our life, to be able to love cash flow. And I want to say, I told this story about Wendy and I when we were younger, but today Wendy and I are on the same page with cash flow. And I love cash flow. I love it today. It's not something that I shy away from. It's something that I lean into today. It's something that's very empowering. It brings a lot of pleasure, it brings a lot of enjoyment, connection. It allows for a lot more creation. And I love being on the same page with Wendy with our cash flow.
So on the coming episodes, we're going to be getting into the next phases of what we typically recommend as financial advisors to clients. We follow a pretty simple framework, which is cash flow protection, wealth accumulation. So we've talked about cash flow. It is the cornerstone, right? Solving that solves a lot of problems, and it really puts you in the mindset of having an even better experience in life, because there is so many opportunities for whether it's entertainment, travel, novelty, experience. There's a ton out there that we get to experience these days. But the cornerstone, the starting place, is making sure that you have healthy cash flow. The next step is protection. We're going to get into what that means and how you apply that. And then finally, wealth accumulation. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you for listening or watching the podcast today. And we will see you on the next episode.